is CORDIScovery. Hello, welcome to this episode of CORDIScovery with me, Abigail Acton. In his novel Animal Farm, Orwell's character claims 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Would the Tyrannosaurus agree? Or did bipedalism give them an evolutionary advantage? This locomotor superiority hypothesis was first proposed to explain what made dinosaurs distinct from other Triassic populations, perhaps aiding their survival into the Jurassic. But was this true? Examining how birds and crocodiles and other animals move now can tell us about the biomechanics of extinct animals and the impact that had on their survival. Beyond moving, the way in which dinosaurs interacted with their environment shaped the world around them. The co-evolution of species and ecology over deep time offers insights about modern ecosystems. So what can we learn from a vanished world? Estimates indicate that there are more than 8 million species providing us food, helping our well-being and our health. But we still don't know much about where and why biodiversity originates and vanishes. So what can we do to protect the evolutionary cradles of the future, biodiversity, and can paleoclimatic simulations and modelling help? In this time of mass extinction, we need all the insights we can get. So helping us to gain those insights are our 3 guests today, all of whom have been supported by EU research and innovation funding. John Hutchinson is a Fellow of the Royal Society and a leader in the field of evolutionary biomechanics. His approach synthesizes experimental and computational methods, such as simulations, to test hypotheses about musculoskeletal form, function, and performance. Hello, John.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Davide Foffa is a postdoctoral researcher in palaeobiology at the University of Birmingham. He uses palaeontological data to understand the origins, evolution, and ecological diversity of groups and ecosystems in deep time and through major evolutionary events such as mass extinctions. Hello, Davide.
Hi, nice to be here.
Hi. Sara Varela is a paleoecologist and principal investigator at the Faculty of Biology at the University of Vigo in Spain. Her focus is on the relationship between climate and life on Earth and how past climatic changes affected geographic ranges and evolutionary pathways of species. Hi, Sara.
Abigail, and hello, John and David. It's a pleasure.
John, I'm going to turn to you first. The Dawn Dinos project experimentally measures factors such as 3D skeletal motions, limb forces, and muscle activations in birds and crocodiles to predict how 10 late Triassic archosaurs may have moved and to test if the results fit expected patterns for locomotor superiority ideas. Prior to your work, what did we think contributed to a dinosaur's success, and what did that success actually mean?
So since the 1980s, the paleontological consensus somewhat was that dinosaurs survived the mass extinction at the end of the Triassic period around 200 million years ago and continued to diversify and become dominant on land in the Jurassic and Cretaceous. Just by chance or coincidental events, unrelated to any particular adaptive features. So in a way, dinosaurs were lucky. That was the dominant idea. Not many papers published to the contrary.
Right. And yet we've always thought of evolution as being a process of adaptability and perfection and filling a certain ecological niche and so on. It seems strange to imagine that in deep time, we didn't think of that also as being applicable.
It is a bit of a conundrum that surviving a mass extinction is success in and of itself, although evolution isn't just adaptation. There also are chance events that happen that have nothing to do with an organism's ability to perform in a certain way. Might just, being in the wrong place at the wrong time is unlucky.
Yeah, no, indeed. So it's either is it special or is it lucky? I understand. So how did you go about unraveling the connections between locomotor diversity and survival?
Well, like you said, we first did studies with living animals that are closely related to these Triassic animals or even descendants of those groups, so birds and crocodiles. And we did that in order to understand them better and to also test how well we could model and simulate those animals move today versus the experimental data we actually got. So we got what you could call validation or testing of the quality of our models and simulations, and those ended up boosting our confidence in how good the approaches were. We then developed models and simulations of the extinct animals using a procedure that I've refined throughout my 25-year career, starting with the bones and then adding more and more information to build a whole body model of a dinosaur or other animal with muscles and so forth, and then asking the computer to simulate how that animal might have moved using the anatomy, the physiology, and so forth that we put into the model. And that predicts movement, and then we can compare movements in different behaviors, walking, running, jumping, between species and see, are any of them better able to do certain things? And that gets at the superiority question, ultimately.
Okay, that's fascinating. And what sort of things did you find?
So far, it's been tantalizing. We found that the simulation approach was really, really hard. When we started the project, the methods were just coming to maturity in the human biomechanics field. They weren't really so mature in paleontology or studies of other animals, except for humans.
Right. And when you say the human biomechanics field, so are we talking about sort of the healthcare scenarios?
Yeah. So modeling and simulating human movement in order to improve the way humans can move. Human problems that humans have, like stroke victims, cerebral palsy, so forth. Those are areas of major research.
Right. So not quite so advanced in the paleontological context. So how did you step in there?
So we adapted those methods to study our living and extinct animals and learn them ourselves, because they were so new that we had to do quite a bit of work learning them and making them usable on anything that's not a human, because the methods were so tailored to humans. We did need to reinvent the wheel a little bit, but it worked. We made progress there. We didn't simulate everything we wanted to simulate, which turned out to be a huge amount of work, but I am not too late in my career to continue analyzing those data. We've got so much that will keep busy for decades to come using what we obtained.
Already, excellent. And what sort of animals were you looking at? So I mean, tell me, you were looking at crocodiles and birds, and I think also at pachyderms such as rhinoceri and so on. What did you actually do? I mean, you can't go and grab a rhinoceros or a crocodile. So how did you approach this?
Well, we got birds and crocodiles to come into our laboratory so we could study them. So
you did grab a crocodile?
Yeah. Some Nile crocodiles. They weren't very big, only a meter long or so, but still dangerous enough. You got to be careful. Yeah, and the birds were only like 500 grams, so these small birds called tinamous from South America. So we used them for the experiments to get the real data on what real animals do.
So would you filmed them or you scanned them, filmed them and scanned them?
We filmed them doing a variety of behaviors, moving over devices that measure like how hard they push against their environment. The filming included what you could loosely call X-ray videos. So we had the animals moving through X-rays that would show us through a video camera attached to the X-ray how the skeleton inside the animal moved in real time. And those give us very high quality data on the locomotion of those animals, which improves then our ability to test how good the models and simulations are.
Right. Okay. Now, I understand that, for example, if we think about theropods, could you just tell the listener a little bit about what a theropod is?
Yeah. So a theropod is and was a bipedal carnivorous, or at least initially carnivorous dinosaur that originated in the Triassic period. So this is one of the first dinosaur groups to appear, and then survived throughout the Mesozoic era, gave rise to things like Velociraptor and T-Rex, which are theropods, and then ultimately gave rise to birds, which technically are theropod dinosaurs because they're descendants of theropod dinosaurs. And
what did you discover about their body sizes and the change of their body sizes in connection, for example, with their thigh bones?
Well, it was well known that theropods started off at pretty small body sizes, but then fairly quickly, especially in the Jurassic and very famously in the Cretaceous, they radiated into large body sizes. That was also known. We didn't discover that. But we did find through comparisons of like thigh bones and so forth from the Triassic onwards that there were dramatic changes in bone shape that related to size and the way the animals move. So if we knew the animal's shape of its bones, we could to some degree predict how it may have moved.
Right, indeed. And then one final point. I was just listening to the news yesterday, and very interestingly on BBC Radio 4, they were talking about that recent discovery in the Oxfordshire quarry, 100 sauropod footprints travelling over a distance of 220 metres. And it occurred to me, very timely a moment for me to be listening to this just before we started our recording now, it occurs to me, John, that actually tracks must be telling you a huge amount about how these animals moved through their environment.
Absolutely, yeah. One animal can leave thousands of tracks in its lifetime, but only leaves one skeleton in the end, if anyone even finds that. So trackway information is very valuable, but unfortunately it doesn't tell us necessarily who made the track or what their anatomy was like, except for their feet. So there are limitations to the trackway data, but they're extremely important because they are real behavior recorded in the geological record.
Lovely. So it adds another dimension at least.
Yeah.
Okay, super. So then, when we think about 2 legs good, 4 legs bad, what's the final vote?
I think there's a lot of nuance to this, and I realized while doing the research that the different hypotheses for why dinosaurs were successful in surviving that mass extinction really were not necessarily mutually exclusive. That it could have been that dinosaurs were lucky, but also were successful, had certain adaptations that helped them survive the end Triassic extinction, like being able to be more athletic, but also there's evidence that they had different growth strategies, growing pretty quickly, maybe had warm-bloodedness early on in their evolution, so forth. So there are probably multiple agreeing hypotheses rather than competing hypotheses.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Huh? It's all part of a tapestry, really. Yeah, super. Thank you so much. You've explained that so well, John. Thanks a lot. Does anyone have any questions for John? Yes, David.
Hi, so it's a little bit of a comment here. So we know that through the Mesozoic, we have the evolution of similar body plans in different periods. So in the Triassic, you have essentially all the body plan that you have also in dinosaur later on. I think that speaks about the what you were saying about the casuality about surviving a mass extinction as well, but also the repetition of similar strategy to deal with their environment. Well, I don't know if you have any comment about that.
Well, so it was thought that dinosaurs were the only members of this broad group that includes crocodiles, birds, and other extinct animals that were around in the Triassic that became bipedal. So bipedalism, being walking and running on 2 legs, was thought to be a dinosaur trait within this group. But then people have realized over the last couple decades that there were some members of the crocodile lineage that became bipedal. So it's not just a dinosaur thing. And that also leads us to conclude that being bipedal wasn't necessarily part of a dinosaur's success. And there certainly was convergent evolution between some of the crocodile lineage animals and dinosaurs. That's just one example.
I don't know why it brings such a great smile to my face, but I just have suddenly a vision of a crocodile running on its back legs. Maybe that shouldn't be making you smile. Maybe that should be making you run for the hills. But still, okay, thank you very much. David, I'm going to turn to you now. The Permian-Triassic mass extinction, known as PTME, killed over 70% of vertebrate species. The EcoDiv project studied the fossil records of the Permian-Triassic ecosystems, along with new field data, to determine how the ecological structure and composition of land systems changed across the PTME and the connection to biodiversity recovery. So, David, what do you think are the gaps in our knowledge of past biodiversity?
Thank you. So I believe that today we have an incomplete vision of what past biodiversity is, in that we have a very good understanding of what species were present at any given time, more or less. Give me some rope here. But we know much less about what the ecological roles of these species occupied in their ecosystem. And I believe that these are 2 aspects that are arguably equally important, because it's only the conjunction of these 2 that tells us about the composition of the ecosystem, but also their structure, their resilience to perturbations, and more broadly about the trajectory of biodiversity through time.
Okay, excellent. And why the Triassic?
The Triassic, I think, is an ideal case scenario here because it starts after the biggest mass extinction that ever happened, which means that we have about 252 million years ago, we have a great vacancy of roles in the ecosystems. There's plenty of opportunity for new groups to evolve. And in fact, we have the evolution of many groups that are still around today. So John mentioned birds, so the descent from dinosaurs that evolved first in the Triassic. Lizards, they start around there. Turtles, modern amphibians and mammals, they're all groups that diversify after the Permian-Triassic extinction.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, that's well explained. So can you tell us what you learned in the project?
Yeah, so pretty much we confirm many hypotheses that they were hypothesized before. So we confirm, for example, that the evolution of new groups after the extinction changed the ecosystem in multiple ways, not only changing the composition, so what type of animal existed at the time, but also they brought new innovation, new evolutionary innovation that in turn created new ecological roles. Can
you possibly give us an example so that we can understand that a bit better?
Absolutely. So the most clear example to me would be that of pterosaurs. So pterosaurs are the first vertebrate to fly ever. So before that, nothing would fly in the sky, but there are plenty of other examples for this. So for example, in the Permian, so before the extinction, reptiles were relegated to minor roles. They were small body sized, pretty much doing things that modern lizards would do. Again, give me some rope here. But after the extinction, then we have the radiation of many different groups, many of which John has also studied, and works like studies like John's demonstrate that these animals were starting doing different things, multiple different things. So before the Triassic, you'd never seen any reptiles that were large body sized, that they were swimming on water, or they could live both on water and land. You didn't have massive carnivores. You didn't have herbivores amongst reptiles. At the same time, you didn't have flying reptiles or animals that could walk on two, or reptiles that would walk on 2 feet. So it's not only the evolution of new groups, but also what innovation they bring to the ecosystem.
Excellent. Okay. So I love hearing how it's possible to build up a picture about what's happening in deep time, because it's so very long ago. Can you tell us more about what you actually did to arrive at these conclusions? Because I know for non-expert listeners like myself, it's almost magical. So can you give us a little bit of an idea of your method so we can see how you got there?
Of course. So it sounds a bit nebulous, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little.
The right place to start for me is the fossil record. So we need to know what animals were present at the time. To know that, we can do a lot of things. We can look at the literature, we can look at previous studies, but my favorite part is integrating this with looking at museum collections and fieldwork. So the first 3 parts, so literature and museum collections and previous studies, tell us pretty much in which area, what animal we could find. But they also tell us a lot of what we are missing. The fossil record is incomplete. And so we can do a lot to try to integrate data that we do not normally use. Museum collections are full of specimen data that we never seen or we never work on, but they are still valuable. And also we can go out in the field and identify areas that we have not explored before to fill in these gaps that we have.
And did you do that, David? Can you tell us a little bit about the fieldwork you conducted?
Of course, my favorite part.
I'm sure.
So the first 2 years of my project were in the United States. I was based at Virginia Tech and worked with my colleagues there. We went to a few expeditions in the Southwest, so Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, to try to find those areas that had the right type of rocks, but perhaps they were not as explored as others. And one of the favorite thing that we found is that we particularly focused on small animals, so microvertebrate size. And the reason for that is that there are multiple ones. So the one that ties better with modern ecology is that the largest variety of animal occurred at small body size.
Yes.
There's a historical one as well that John mentioned. So the evolution of new clades often starts at small body size. So if you sample smaller things, you have a better chance to recognize those at the early stage of their evolution. And for me in particular, it was important to have the most complete picture about the composition of an ecosystem. Even if it was a single tooth, I just wanted to know what specific animal were there, because that tells us, that gives us a more complete picture. Now we face another problem. Now we have the composition, we have the species list for an ecosystem. Now we have to turn this data into ecological data. And that's where we can borrow techniques from modern ecology, particularly trait ecology. So the trick here is try to understand what every single animal do in their ecosystem. And to do that, you can understand, you can try to find out what body size that was, what diet they had, what habitat they lived in, and how they walked around or they moved around. With these small and many others, by the way. And with only this small number of traits, you can characterize an ecosystem. You can come up with a very large number of unique ecological role, a combination.
Excellent.
If you want an example, a theropod dinosaur that John mentioned before, in the Triassic, they would be small-bodied, bipedal, so walking on two, terrestrial, and carnivore. So that would be an ecological role. You can do that for all the other animal ecosystem. You can do that for all the other assemblages, and then compare how these assemblages between each other.
And then bring it all together and get a clearer picture of what the world actually looked at that time.
That's right.
Fantastic.
And the succession of assemblages, how they evolve through time as well.
Right. Okay. Super. Thank you so much, David. That was very, very well explained. I appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions or observations to make? Yes, Sarah, you would like to say something.
So I have a curiosity for David, that how common is for people working in such old scenarios that work in such detail?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the short answer is that it's not very common at all. The main reason is that, first of all, we didn't know until quite recently how common these things were. So we started being able to recognize these assemblages only a few years ago, really. So yeah, this is something that is much more common in younger stages, so in the Cretaceous, Jurassic perhaps as well. It comes with pros and cons, because microvertebrates are often very broken, very difficult to work with. So you often do not have complete skeleton to work with. But the pros is that you get a more complete picture of the ecosystem.
How big is a microvertebrate, please, David? What sort of size are you talking about?
We can...
Ish.
Yeah, millimeters. Okay. In the millimeters.
Yeah.
Perhaps even less.
Yeah.
So some fish tooth you cannot see them without the microscope.
So we're talking about parts of the animal?
Yes.
You're not talking about an entire animal that's a couple of millimeters big. You're talking about elements of small animals.
Yeah. The things that are most useful are teeth, little jaws.
The stuff that, yeah.
They are often enough to understand at least what group of animal was around.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay, thank you for clarifying. That's a good question, Sarah, indeed. I mean, how do they go about it? Fascinating, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to turn to you now, Sarah. MAPUS used modeling and mapping processes looking at species origination and extinction through deep time to answer the theoretical and practical questions involving where and why species originate, spread, and indeed vanish. So your work overlaps a bit with that of David's, because he's trying to build up a clearer ecological picture in its diversity. And that's what you're interested in doing too. So why do you feel that such research is needed, Sarah?
Why it matters? Because it has a really clear link. If we understand life, we can predict what is happening in the future, for instance. And now we are in a big mess because we are destroying nature at a real big rates, and we need to understand it because we depend on nature.
Absolutely. Okay, good. So how did mappers set about getting a better idea of the extinction rates and how species vanish?
Yeah, we are trying to, the common knowledge right now is like climate is important and species change their distribution because of climate change. And when you talk with paleontologists, they say like, okay, because of this big climatic change, we have more species or less species, or this kind of species radiates, or this kind of species gets extinct, this kind of thing. So we aim it to measure, quantify, and try to make like what if scenarios. So if climate change in this way, what is happening? And this is our goal.
Okay, and you sit at a crossroads, I think, between two fields that are usually separate, which is ecology, which looks at different species across space, and evolution, which looks at differences in time. So how do you do this when you say you sit at the crossroads? What's the benefit, and how do you actually get your data?
The data is from people going to the field. So we have large data sets that are now available online. And this is a common effort like people are doing. And now we have also physicists working with climate, making really nice models for the present to understand the future. But they are also putting these models to understand the past. So it's nice. So now we are in a time that we can try to make computational biogeography or something like that. That in the past it was not like that. In the past we were working in a field in one place, trying to understand the climate of this place and trying to describe the place. Now we have many places. We have models of climate, for instance, and we can try to gain knowledge of traits like adaptation because of like constraints of life because of whatever.
Lovely. And so can you tell me, how did you go about within the Mappers project, Sarah, to get a more rounded picture? What did you actually do?
Yeah, we have two ways of doing this. One is just loading a lot of data from, for instance, this large database of fossil records. And with this, we can describe what is happening. We can try to have a hint of patterns, and we can try to link with these potential processes that are behind this to try to understand what are the constraints of life. And then for testing this, what we do is trying to do the so-called mechanistic models. And these are models that you started, imagine the world, you start in one cell, this lineage that you are starting have some traits. You can put body mass, you can put anything that normally, as David were saying, like for past species, we have body size, we have diet, and we have locomotion. This is the classic 3 axes of paleo traits. And then with this, we can say how far they disperse, and we have the layers of climate, and we have the climate each 1 million years or something like that. Continents move also, and you have everything. All the picture is like a video game, and you allow the species to evolve, and you put certain rules, and then you try these what-if scenarios. What if climate is ruling the lineage evolution? What is competitive behavior is ruling this? If more than like you have like a carrying capacity linked with precipitation or anything. So we build what-if scenarios and trying to look what are the patterns that we have at the end, how many species we have in each area, and these things.
Okay, that sounds excellent, brilliant. And what sort of things did you discover?
We are still there.
Yes, yeah. What are you uncovering at the moment?
I think people are very focused on specialization, and like some species are super special and they're in the tropics, and this is amazing, and we have more diversity in the tropics because we have more specialization and niche partitioning, and this is ecology framework and what people think. And we are discovering that being generalist is a really nice thing. and all ecosystems can be really dominated by generalist species.
So when you say generalist species, sorry, what do you mean?
Yeah, species that they have, they're very plastic and they can survive in the tropics or in the temperate areas.
Can you give us an example?
A wolf is a very generalist species.
A wolf. There we go. Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a specialist creature, I suppose, would be like a koala or something that just really just only ate a certain type of eucalyptus leaf or something.
It can be about diet. It can be about climate. You can have also different axes of specialization. For instance, you have an anteater. It's very specialized in the diet, but it lives across like a lot of environments. So
right.
you can divide. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so the fossil record, other data, information coming from paleontologists like John and David can feed into your computer models, and they can tell us what, ultimately?
They can help us to gain basic knowledge.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any observations for Sarah or comments for Sarah, please? Yes, John.
I find it interesting that, as is usual for paleontology, all three of our projects rely heavily on the fossil record itself and real bones and so forth, which all of paleontology relies ultimately on discovery of specimens and curation of them in museums. But also, there's a common thread through all of our studies of modeling or even some kind of simulation. And as someone who does quite a bit of that, I sometimes run into people who say, oh, that's just a model, which is, I think, used as a sort of dismissal of theoretical approaches as opposed to very empirical observation-based approaches, like looking at fossils. So I'm wondering how you, Sarah, view the pros and cons of modeling and simulation in your kind of research.
I think in all researchers, we are all doing models. Even the people that are measuring things, they do an ANOVA or something, and these are models. So this is comparison of means with a distribution, and these are models. So we are all now, we are in a phase, we have this kind of small stats and tests, and now we are entering a much more complex, because computers are faster and they are cheaper, and now we can run things that 10 or 20 years ago, it was impossible. Apart from models, we need data, and we need people like David going into the field and taking crazy detailed data to test all these things.
And John, I mean, he spent 20 years looking at how rhinoceroses and crocodiles chase him around the laboratory. That's got to count for something too. Yeah. No, they're both very practical out there, people. Superb. Well, that was really interesting. Thank you very much for your time. I think you've all explained your work very well and how it shines a light, how the deep time past shines a light on the future. I think it's an interesting concept. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ciao.
Goodbye.
You're very welcome. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. If you've enjoyed this podcast, follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you stream your podcasts, and check out the homepage on the Cordis website. Subscribe to make sure the hottest research in EU-funded science isn't passing you by. And if you're enjoying listening, why not spread the word? We've talked about robotic bees and the work that's improving our ability to deflect asteroids. In our last 50 episodes, there'll be something there to tweak your curiosity. Perhaps you want to know what other EU-funded projects are doing in the field of paleontology. The Cordis website will give you an insight into the results of projects funded by Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe that are working in this area. So come and check out the research that's revealing what makes our world tick. We're always happy to hear from you. Drop us a line. editorial@cordis.europa.eu. Until next time.